everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We're for you. I'm your host Avantika. Thank you so much for being here with us today. In today's episode, we have a guest who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. She talks about her mental health healing with the help of her faith, and also being a part of the Black community. She talks about how her race played a factor in her mental health journey as well. So it's a really interesting conversation between the intersection of being part of the Black community as well as faith and mental health healing. I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you're watching to this on YouTube, let us know what resonates with you the most. And subscribe and you're on the drill. And if you're watching to this on Spotify, do leave us a rating if you like the episode. And yeah, let's get it started. You can reach out to us on Instagram and email. Everything will be linked in the description below. So thank you for being here and let's get this started. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Beautiful You. I'm your host, Avantika. Today, we have a very special guest with us. She is Sarah Fox. She's a Christian woman who encourages others to stay pure in a world that says otherwise. She's an alumna of the King's College with a BA in Politics, Philosophy and Economics with a pre-law mind. Sarah currently works as a case manager and a transformational coach at St. Nick's Alliance. With this profession, she spends most of her time mentoring at-risk youth and preparing them for job opportunities. She's also the host of the Rough.edges podcast, where she shares educational tools about mental health, anecdotes about her own healing journey, and the intersection between faith and mental illness. Sarah also loves performing spoken word, writing for her blog, and trying out new exotic things. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so stoked to have you here. How are you doing?
Wow. Thanks for having me. I am doing great.
That is amazing. I'm so glad that we are finally getting to the episode, and I'm so happy to have you here with us. So to start off the episode, I would like to know, when were you diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and could you run us, through your journey and your initial reaction as to when you newly got the diagnosis?
Yes. So I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder in January of 2021. So it was so interesting because the previous month in December, I had gotten into a serious manic episode, and it was around end of the year, and I was excited for the new year and all of that had to have in store. I had recently graduated college that year, so I was just excited about everything. And that kind of led to me speaking really fast, me feeling like I was invincible, on top of the world, nothing could touch me. And my family was noticing something was a little off. They were like, hey, you're not really coherent. You're speaking really fast. We can't keep up with you. You're not really making sense. What's going on? And so I didn't really think anything of it because I was like, hey, it's the new year, new me, everything's going to be great. And it wasn't great. Spoiler alert. It was just a whirlwind of different things that I was experiencing. In addition to the euphoric side, I also experienced psychosis, where I was hearing things, I was hearing voices, I was seeing things that weren't actually there. And through that, I also had anxiety attacks. I had a depressive episode where I was weeping for I'm talking 30 minutes, almost to an hour on end. And it just all led up to me being hospitalized in January. And while I was in the hospital, I received the bipolar diagnosis. So that was, January 2021.
Wow. So you experienced mania with certain symptoms of psychosis as well as depression right after it. That sounds very intense to go through so many things at the same time. So when you got the diagnosis, when the doctor let you know about it, how did you, what was your initial reaction to the diagnosis?
Oh, I remember that day as clear as anything, because I was waiting to hear what was going on, because the doctors had to meet. They had to discuss what, the diagnosis was going to be. And so I was just waiting there in limbo for like a good week and a half in the hospital to know what my diagnosis was. And the day that they finally decided to be like, hey, we're going to give you some information, a nurse came to me and she gave me like this thick packet. And she was like, this is information about your diagnosis. If you have any questions, please let us know. So I went to my room and I saw across the top of the packet in big bold letters, it said bipolar disorder. And I was like, oh no, this is a mistake because there's no way that I have bipolar disorder. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. Like people would describe other people as, oh, you're so bipolar, or the weather is so bipolar. And I always saw that as like a negative connotation. So like seeing this diagnosis right in front of me, like on paper, it's just like, oh my gosh, not only did it feel real, but it also felt very discouraging. And I just remember crying, like as soon as I read that, because I was like, I cannot believe that this is going to be my reality going forward. And I wrestled with that for a while because I was like, I still, even to this day, sometimes I'm like, wow, I have bipolar disorder and I just don't know like how to like fully accept it. Like I've come a long way, I would say, but it's still kind of like a shock sometimes, or it's like, wow, this is what I have to manage now. So yeah, that was like that day. And that was like, my initial reaction was like a little bit of discouragement and disbelief and anger.
Wow. That sounds like a lot to go through it at such a young age. It's getting, the diagnosis right away, like right off the bat, and not knowing what it is because there's a lot of stigma around it. Like whenever I ask someone, oh, do you know what bipolar is? A lot of people I've heard this way too many times where people are like, oh, something like split personality or something like that. They have like a very bizarre idea of what actually bipolar is. And it's like, and you grow up with that thinking, and you're not very well aware. So it's, I can imagine if it's also like a little bit scary because you're like, okay, what exactly is this? Because there are just too many questions and not so many answers. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I no, like I completely really resonated with me when you mentioned how you were like, oh, bipolar, like I could, you could not have that. That certainly does not sound like you because I remember like when I got my diagnosis, I was like, no way, I could never have that. Like no, and that's not what happened to other people, not me. It was just there's a lot of anger towards it as well. So I see that you do a lot of advocacy for the intersection between your spirituality, between your faith, as well as mental health healing. So I wanted to ask, when exactly did you start to come in terms with the diagnosis, and when did how did your faith help you with your mental health healing?
That's a great question. And for me, growing up in like a Christian household and being a woman of faith, my faith played a huge role in my healing journey. And that's where a lot of like my hope and determination came from, to actually stick with my management, like my mental health management styles, because I was at a really, really low place after I got my diagnosis. And I was just like wrestling with a lot of things, like namely, like, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to church, I'm reading the Bible, like I'm doing all of the things that I am expected to do. And I'm still faced with this thing that I didn't even ask for, And so that was a long journey of like really wrestling and just being like angry at God, but also confused as to, okay, how am I going to manage my mental health condition while still upholding my faith? And so the way that I did that was through a lot of prayer and my community. I have to give a huge shout out to my church community and also mentors that I had along the way that have really like tried to just let me know that it's okay to feel these things, that it's normal to question God, it's normal to ask questions. And again, they didn't judge me, And they let me know that, hey, you're dealing with these things, but God sees you and he knows what you're going through. And for me, that kind of gave me the comfort that I needed to know that my hope is found in Jesus. And I know that he is going to be with me through this entire ordeal. And I honestly, it's a daily process because I still find myself sometimes, just being like, God, I have like a serious, like, irritable spout, or my mood just went from 0 to 100. Like, what is going on? Like, I still question it sometimes. But I will say that now I have a better understanding or more of an awareness of how God has shown up in my life through people, through my mental health support team, through like doing the podcast even. Like that was a huge thing that got me to connect with the community at large and really see that I'm not alone in this journey. And I have other people, and even talking to people like you has like really helped me to see that, hey, getting through this is possible and you can have the hope to make it through as well.
Oh, that is so sweet. So it it started off with the anger towards your faith, because why is this happening to me? I'm doing everything right. So these are the things I didn't ask for, because it is something which is difficult. And once you know that it is something that does not have a cure yet and will be with you for like a longer time, more anger like gets collected over time. So how did that whole process, like, could you run us through the process of how it went from anger to acceptance? Because I thought that you also said that it's also like a daily struggle even today. So how did it go from anger towards your faith to accepting it and, believing that like your faith will be there with you with every part of the journey?
Yeah, so part of that journey was really just like, it was like a twofold thing where it was like I had to learn more about bipolar disorder and what that entails, and also learn that me having a mental health condition is not an indicator of how much faith I have, right? Because a lot of the times in the church, it's like mental health is like heavily stigmatized. And it is something that is like, oh, if you're dealing with this, you have no faith, or you doubted God, or you did something wrong. And that's why you have this. Like, I had to do some serious, like, independent soul searching for myself, which was like getting into the theology, getting into reading my word, getting into praying, getting into like involving myself in the wider church community and also the mental health community as well. Because when I first got diagnosed, I was like, okay, how do I manage this? Like, what do I need to learn? Like, what are the things that I need to know so that I can be able to live well with this? And for me, that was like going to therapy also. And I have a Christian therapist who also specializes in marrying the theology with the psychology. And that also gave me like a wider perspective on the fact that me having this bipolar disorder is not an indicator of my character. And it doesn't mean that I am not in the hands of God. It doesn't mean that he doesn't love me anymore. It just means that we live in a broken world where we are dealing with these things also on a physical level as well. And me also learning how to separate the physical from the spiritual, because not all the time they're synonymous. Like, yeah, we are physical and spiritual beings, according to like, the Christian theology, but that doesn't mean that all of our physical problems are directly linked to all of our spiritual problems, right? So I just had to learn like how to actually separate the two, and also see ways in which my faith could actually help me with my healing process. So I usually tell people for me, it's Jesus and therapy. Like, those two are not like mutually exclusive. It's like I could go to church and still have a meeting with my psychiatrist. I could read my Bible and still take medicine. Like, it's like, it's not one or the other. It's both in conjunction.
Right.
So yeah, it was like a huge journey to like actually get into all that research and know that, okay, I need to learn and I can manage this effectively.
That is beautiful. I love how the whole mentality shift from it doesn't have to be just either or, it's an and. I absolutely love that idea that it's, oh, I could see this psychiatrist and go to the church. Like, that's beautiful. That's profound. Because the conversations that I would have so far when it comes to faith, people would just preach their faith. That's it. And they wouldn't believe in medicine or just medicine in general. And if there are other people who have been benefited from the medication treatment and psychotherapy and all that, they wouldn't be believing in faith as much and would be just leaning towards one part of it, like just the medicine. So it's really wonderful to talk to someone who has been benefited from both of it, and it's an and, not either or. That's beautiful. So I would love to know more about your journey, about how you came on with your podcast, and why did you name it Rough Edges Podcast?
Oh, yes. I love this question because I will tell you, I did not want to do podcasting initially. I'll be honest with you. I did want to get into a space where I could share my story with others, because when I was first researching, I didn't really find a lot of people who looked like me, a Black woman, and it was also a woman of faith, talking about their mental health journeys. Like, I didn't really find much of that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to go out there and share my story, whatever. But I didn't know how to do that. And I was also kind of nervous because I was like, ooh, I don't want to put all my business out there. But like, I just wanted to like have a platform. So at first it was a website. I was going to do like, okay, let me do a mental health website, kind of like a blog, and put all my writings out there because I love writing. So I was like, oh, I could just do a website. But then my friends, like me, like talking about the process, they're like, girl, like, you have a story to tell. You need to do a podcast. I was like, not a podcast. But I'm like, I don't like my voice on recording, first of all. And second of all, what would I even name it? Like, I didn't have any of that. And then it's just like, one day I was sitting, and I love writing poetry as well. As you mentioned in my bio, I love doing spoken word. And I was just inspired to write a poem about like my journey. And the title of that poem was actually Rough Edges. And so while I was writing the poem, I was thinking of, those Japanese, like those, like the art that they have where they're like mended together with like gold, and it creates this beautiful art piece. And I was thinking about that the whole time that I was writing the poem. And I was like, how our journeys are, even though they are rough, and even though we are rough around the edges, they could come together to make such a beautiful work of art. And I was just writing that poem, didn't really think anything of it. And then I was like, still thinking about the podcast idea. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to call it Rough Edges, And that's how it really like started. And I didn't expect it to actually go that far and be like, oh, people, I was just like, let me record this for myself. And if people listen to it, great. But now I'm over here talking to like a mental health advocate from India. And I'm like, how did we get here?
I love that story so much. Oh my God, because it's not like, oh, I've always wanted to do it. And then that is so wonderful. I love that story, and I love meaning behind Rough Edges podcast. That is so cool. So out of how long has it been that you've been podcasting?
I've been doing this for almost 2 years now.
2 years. What is like out of all the conversations, because I see that you have a lot of guests on your podcast as well. So out of all the episodes that you had, what is like one surprising thing that stood out to you regarding people living with bipolar disorder?
That's a good question. So the most surprising thing for me was just the fact that I wasn't alone. And the fact that when people were sharing their stories, I'm like, oh my God, like I think there's something similar. And it's just so amazing to see the wonderful community that came out of it as well. And I'm just so grateful to be able to make those connections, because when I first started, like when I first got diagnosed, I was like, okay, like I feel so alone. Like, where is everybody? And then as I started podcasting, like more and more people be like, hey, I really resonate with what you said. Like, let's connect. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah.
It is so cool that it's like when you're creating something and you're sharing your journey, it resonates with someone else, and they feel less alone, and then they let you know about it, and then you feel less alone. So it's like you're working both ways. It's a two-part relationship, and you form a community like that, and then it's beautiful and it's very empowering, and I love that. Thank you for starting your podcast and doing everything that you do. I checked out your video about, I think it was related to bipolar, and I loved it. The recording, the message behind it, everything. You look beautiful. It was amazing.
Thank you.
So, ever since the diagnosis, how did your daily routine change, and how aware were you of the changes that were taking?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So one thing that I had to prioritize above everything was my sleep. And I'm not gonna lie to you, like I'm still like a night owl at heart. So
I am on the couch. Oh my god, something that I struggle with so much, and thank you for saying that.
yeah, because my psychiatrist will be like, honey, you need to sleep. And I'm like, honey, I'm up at night.
It's like like the right thing to do, but it's like you don't want to sleep. It's fun staying up up at night. It's fun, and like you get work done. But yes, continue.
Yes, for sure. And so I was like, having a little trouble managing sleep in the beginning, but I must say that I noticed a huge change in like how my mood was affected when I did get a good night's sleep. Because some nights I would go to bed at like 10:30, and some nights I would go to bed at like 1 a.m. I know that's a huge like difference, but it's like when I went to bed at 10:30, I saw like me like being more refreshed in the morning, me being more neutral in my mood. Whereas if I went to bed at 2 a.m. and woke up the next morning, it's like I was a little more irritable. I was like, more prone to like, the depressive side of things. So I would say sleep was like a huge factor in that. And also trying to minimize stress. I do work in a high stress job as a case manager. So one thing that I try to do outside of my job is like do things to de-stress and decompress. Sometimes even before I go into work, I like listen to like some motivational music, calming music before I go to work, and try to just ease my mind before I take on the stuff for the day. So yeah, minimizing stress and sleep is like some of the changes that I've seen.
Minimizing stress and prioritizing sleep. Okay.
Yeah.
It works. I think I gotta try it. Because like, I don't know, dude, it's with everything. Stress is like a constant, and I do everything else but prioritizing sleep. Like you mentioned your sleeping times are like 10 or 1 during exam period, because I also go to college at the moment. During exam period, my time like sleeping time is like 1 or 5.
Wow.
So gotta prioritize that. Yeah, I love that. So how did your family, the friends around you, react to the diagnosis, and what were their reactions to it?
Yeah, so I would start off with like my inner circle, which would be like mom, sister, like people that are like closest to me that have witnessed the manic episode. For them, they just wanted to know like if I was okay, because they were just like terrified, shocked. My younger sister, she was like traumatized by the whole ordeal, and she just wanted to know like, hey, is Sarah gonna be okay? And with that, they just got on it. They were like, let's do some research. Let's get some books. Like, we need to know what's going on with you, So that was like my inner circle. They really like tried to rally around me. Other friends that I have told about it were a little bit shocked. And some of those relationships have kind of fizzled out after that. So I've had a few relationships kind of end after I kind of shared that information, which was like pretty heartbreaking. But at the same time, I kind of knew right then and there that not everybody was ready to hear this. and it was going to be like a heavy weight. So I just decided, hey, I'm going to share my story, and it's up to you whether or not you want to be able to, take part in that, like, realistically speaking. And then there were some other friends of mine that just were super, super supportive. Like, they were just like, asking me like, hey, how's everything going? You doing good? Like, they would check in. They'd be like, oh, have you slept? How's your sleeping? Like, they would just be like all over it. So I appreciate all of my friends. And then my mentors were also very receptive of it. They were like, giving me feedback, or they would just be open into saying like, hey, Sarah, you're talking a little bit too fast. Is everything going okay? How's your stress level? Is everything fine? So yeah, I've gotten like support, but also some people who have walked away. And that's just, reality.
I like that you touched both sides of it, the ones who are super supportive and sometimes you just like really walk away. You had mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why you started the podcast was because you don't have anyone from the Black community who preaches, like who talks about faith and mental health healing as well. So I wanted to ask, how did race play a role in your treatment plan, or you just with your mental health?
Yeah, so race played a huge role, especially in the way that I viewed mental health, because in the Black community, especially as Black women, we are like conditioned to be the strong Black women, or the women that hold it all together. And with that added pressure of like trying to be perfect and also trying to be strong for everybody and help everybody else out, it's like we don't have time for mental health. Like, we don't have time for the self-care and the treatments. Like, that was something that was pretty foreign to us as Black women. So it's like having that, I was pretty like resistant in the beginning to like medication, because I'm like, oh no, I'm strong. I can handle it. I don't need all of that. And then God had to humble me and say, no, honey, you do need that, because you went through something very significant and traumatic, and you need the mood stabilizers to kind of help you out with, managing your bipolar disorder. And another aspect of the racial element is just the stigma surrounding actually seeking therapy. Because I had a therapist before I even got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that was even like a hard thing for me to do, because I was dealing with a lot of stressful situations before. And I was like, I do need a therapist, but I also don't want to air out my family's dirty laundry. I also don't want to be seen as weak. I also don't want to be seen as, oh, you couldn't tough it out, or you couldn't pray enough. So why do you need a therapist? Like, that was like my whole mindset. So my attitude towards therapy and mental health was just very averse, because I was thinking to myself, I am a strong Black woman, and you can't tell me that I need antidepressants, because I do not, So that was like my mentality. And I have to say that mental health issues are very stigmatized in the Black community, and that's a whole nother episode on its own. But I will say that we need to get used to, the idea that going to therapy and taking medication does not mean that you are a weak person. It just means that you need these additional things to help you. I mean, when it comes to like diabetes or high blood pressure, we always say, hey, yeah, take your medication for that. Go to the doctor. So why is it different with a mental health issue? So we kind of need to, as a community, just love each other and be more vulnerable with each other and be like, hey, I can have weak moments and still be strong and get through that,
I love your message. And throughout it all, I can sense a lot of, again, and, like it's all a very gray area, and you could have this and be that. I really resonate with that, and I really appreciate you sharing that message with us. We like growing up, I never really thought how, because I grew up in an Indian society, so that's all I knew. But thinking about like other factors, I understand that Black community faces a whole lot of struggles of their own, but I didn't particularly think so much about how it affected the mental health segment as well, like how that affected you in the mental health healing journey as well. So that is something that gave me something to think about. So thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah.
That brings me to like another question. What is something you wish people asked you more?
That is excellent. That's an excellent question. I just wish people would ask me, like, are you doing okay? Because I feel like people, yes, they ask me that, but I feel like that's a very weighted question because it's like, you see me as like, okay, this podcaster, or for those of you who are listening, you're like, wow, she's like overcome a lot of things. Like, wow, amazing. But I have my moments, and I'm also human. So it's like, when people say, hey, how are you? I want you to ask me that, but also mean it. And, just take the time out to hear like my good side and my bad side. I'm sure you meant like, when do you want to ask about podcasting? But I'm just like, let me sit in this moment of like, how you doing? Like,
No, that it hit me hard. It hit me so hard when you said that. Like I got chills. I was like, yeah, it's don't cry on the podcast. People can see it now. It's a video podcast. So yeah, I'm doing. How no, like I'm telling you, how have you been doing? Because I know you have a lot on your plate, and we could talk about it off the record as well. But how have you been?
So I have been trying to manage a lot, and I've been pretty stressed. I'm not going to lie, because it's a lot to juggle with going to work. And then I'm also in school, and I'm also to do the cat kind of. So it has been a lot. But while I'm stressed, I am also just happy to be in this space talking to you. And it's just reminding me of why I need to do this and why I want to do this.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with us. So, what would you say are some of your non-negotiables for managing bipolar today?
Yes. So, a few of them would be one, minimizing stress, as I mentioned before. Just like taking out anything that is like unnecessary stress. So, like for example, with some relationship stuff, like the toxic relationships, I'm cutting that all off because I'm like, I don't need you also stressing me out. And then just trying to manage my time a little bit better. I'm still working on that department because I wear many hats, if you could imagine. So just trying to like manage my calendar and like be more gracious with myself if I have to reschedule something, or if I double book, like try to give myself a little bit of grace because we're still working on it. But yeah, just trying to like minimize stress as much as I can. Another thing that is a non-negotiable for me is just like negative self-talk, like just eliminating that completely. And that's been something that I've been trying so hard to work on, because the way that you talk to yourself is going to dictate how you present yourself to others, and also how you manage your mental health condition. Because the way that you speak to yourself, if you keep saying, oh, I'm like super moody, oh, I'm stupid, like I can't manage this, I can't do this right, then that's what you're going to believe. And that's going to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so one thing that is non-negotiable for me is talking negatively to myself and about myself. Like I'm trying to like stay away from all that negative self-talk, because I want to be able to show myself some compassion, especially when going through these things. So just to do a little recap, minimizing stress and no negative self-talk for sure.
That is amazing. Could you give us an example of how you changed some of your negative self-talk?
Yeah. So what I used to do is like every time I made a mistake, I would berate myself and, just say a whole bunch of horrible things about myself. Now I'm trying to like, if something happens or I make a mistake, I try to like step back and be like, okay, breathe. It's not the end of the world. You made a mistake. You're a human being. And I try to just like envision like me talking to like somebody I really love and care about. So let's say, for example, my sister, if she messed up and she made a mistake, I wouldn't automatically be like, why are you so dumb? Like, why would you ever do that? Like, that was the stupidest thing you could have done. I wouldn't do that. I'll be like, hey, bro, it's okay. Like, we all make mistakes. It's fine. It's nothing into the world. I love you. You're great. You're amazing. I would try to talk to myself in the way that I would talk to my sister or anyone that I really love and care about. So framing it that way has helped a lot. And I'm not going to lie, I'm still working on it, but I am making some huge improvements. So yeah.
I love that. That is so profound. That is so beautiful. One of the things, like showing compassion and talking to yourself like because in the end, you have to take care of yourself. So you need to treat yourself like someone that you care about and someone that you love, That is the only way to show grace. Otherwise, you would just end up being so frustrated with yourself. It's like that honestly reminds me of this one thing. If I were to, let's say, wake up at like 7 in the morning, and if I end up waking up at 9, I have everything planned from 7 to 9, right? So if you're like waking up late, you miss out on certain things, so you're behind the schedule. Years ago, my self-talk would be, oh my God, you're so dumb and you can't even like wake up on time and stuff. I mean, agreed that the last few days I've been very busy and I slept barely for like 4 hours. But then I would still have this conversation in my head that, oh, you're so dumb and like, why would you do that? You knew that we had things to do. Why did you not like wake up on with the alarm and everything? But now it's like, okay, if I slept in for 2 more hours than I had initially planned to, it's because my body needed it. So why did my body need the rest? So it's like also questioning about why something happens, sort of berating yourself. That is how you show compassion and grace to yourself. So I absolutely love that and resonate with that so much. What is something you wish everyone knew about bipolar disorder?
All right, that's a great question. And if I could, there are just two things that I want people to know. One, mania is not always a euphoric experience. It can be very severe. Like, and in my experience, I was like very aggressive, very volatile, very vulgar, and it was traumatizing not only to myself, but also to my family members who witnessed that firsthand. And a lot of the times it's like, especially people's like conception about bipolar disorder, especially with mania, it's like, oh, you're very bubbly, you're very energetic, you're very creative, productive. And, they're trying to spin it as like, oh, it's like euphoria, like you're in a great state. And it starts out that way, at least in my experience. But it kind of escalated. If it's not treated, it can escalate to something more severe where you can have those bouts of aggression. You can be very hostile. You can be very verbally and even physically abusive. So I just want to take that like misconception and kind of highlight the reasons why bipolar needs to be treated in that way. So that would be like the first thing. And the second thing I wish people knew is that sleep has a huge role in like managing bipolar. Like, I can't stress this enough. Like, managing your sleep is like half the battle of managing bipolar disorder. And yes, even though I know that it is hard, very hard, but it is doable. Like, at least like the way that I try to do it is like, okay, what time did I go to bed the previous night? If I went to bed at 11, I'm like, okay, let me try to go to bed at 10:30 and get it down to like 30 minutes at a time. Instead of like jumping from, well, I went to bed at 12, let me go to bed at 9. Like, that's not realistic. And so I'm trying like really hard to like set it to increments of time where I'm like, okay, I went to bed at 12 last night. Let me try 11:30 this night and see how it goes, And so that's my method. But managing sleep is crucial to managing bipolar disorder.
I love that. Something I'll be working on as well. So sleep and mania is not always euphoric, because I did come across a lot of instances where people do say that, oh, so just like happy all the time. That must be great. I was like, no, it's not. There's so much anxiety as well involved in it. And there's so much more to it than just euphoria. So I'm really glad that you brought it out and put it out there. Is there anything that I missed out on that you wanted me to ask, or something that you would want to like expand on maybe?
Nah, you did a really good job. I would just say, like, if I may, like, just like a word of encouragement for people who are like, in the early stages, or people who are like trying to manage bipolar disorder in general. I would just like to say, first off, your diagnosis is not indicative of your character. You are not a bad person because you have bipolar disorder. It is a common thing, and apparently a lot of people struggle with this as well. So you are not alone. And I also want to encourage you that you have hope and that you can make it through this. I know it seems dark. I know it can seem like very frustrating and daunting, but I just want to let you know that you are a strong individual and you can make it through this. And so I'm rooting for you on the other side of this podcast.
Thank you for sharing that. That is really informative. And yeah, where can people find you?
Yes, so I am on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. And I also have a website, rough.edges.podcast.com. So you can find me on either of those platforms.
All right, perfect. I'll be linking everything down in the description. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that for your further journey, and I can't wait to work more with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening to the episode. I hope you found something that resonated with you. If you did, let us know in the comments down below. If you're watching this on YouTube, and if you're watching this or listening to this on Spotify, then do leave us a 5-star review if you like it. And you can reach out to us on Instagram or email. You can reach out to Sarah as well. And everything to our social media will be linked in the description down below as well. So thank you for being here with us today. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. I love you. Bye.